Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Live, presented by Centris Federal Credit Union. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. We are joined now by Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. BC, what's going on, man?
Oh, not much. How are you guys?
Hey, BC, I'm going to ask you something because we're boys. And I'm dead dog serious. I'm just curious. So, because there were probably 4 or 5 of these questions yesterday. Okay? And you may or may not have asked one of them. But do you guys have a feel on how a coach will answer and you ask the question anyway, relative to like at this stage in when guys are on staff or where they are in the off season about individual players?
Yeah.
Do you just shoot your shot and hope to get an answer, or do you know, walk me through it? Because there were a couple of those yesterday, and I'm like, there's no way they're going to go into specifics.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I think I did ask one of those questions, so you can get after me accordingly.
I'm curious.
I think because in my job, it's like 365 days of Husker football. You're always like analyzing the roster this way and that way. Whenever you get a coach in front of you at the microphone, you're like searching for a kernel, like, because you're thinking like, maybe next week when it's a little slow, I'll write a little 400-word story on punter Jack McAllister, for instance, And so if you ever hear me ask, which I did, I asked a question to Mike Eckler about McAllister and Gallick, the long snapper, and just like, what can they give you? There's not much Mike Eckler can do with that at this point, like 2 to 3 weeks in. I understand that. But he was on fire, and that he's a quote machine. And I thought, he might just spin out 250 words here that give a little story on that. So I think there's some of that goes with it. I thought Sam asked a good question about Bly Hill to Addison Williams, because although Addison's getting to know his guys, I think Bly Hill's an interesting player in a deep room that we forget about. Like, he was atop I don't know that we forget about him, but he was atop the depth chart at the end of spring, and then he had that injury. So he's going to be an interesting storyline. So I don't think we went too far with the individual stuff, but yeah, I could be guilty of like going down the entire secondary with Addison Williams if I was allowed. And that's not fair to him because he's just getting to know guys' names and stuff.
It's not a guilt or innocence thing. I always wonder, and sometimes it does depend on who asks the questions, because probably the more of an affinity I have for a guy when he asks the question, I kind of try to get into how he or she is thinking, right? So we saw it a couple weeks ago with Dasan McCullough, and Coach Simpson really wasn't going to take the bait.
Yeah.
But he said just enough. Hey, body type, development. Kristen Coggins put weight on. He still has to. Where it lent itself to a follow-up. But I almost get the sense that they've been conditioned, or they just don't know. They just don't know enough yet, because we heard about the Donovan Jones thing. And they just don't know enough yet, or leadership and stuff like that, where they don't know enough to make any generalizations. But there's some smart people in that room that know you guys can feel if you think you have an in, or like an opening, or a guy makes himself vulnerable to asking a follow-up about specific players. Like, do you – I guarantee you're smart. You can get a feel if you can get an individual player snuck in as a question, right?
Yeah, definitely. There's some coaches who will go more down that road. It's easier to do if a guy's been in the program at least a year. So that's sort of the difficulty, I think, of the last two. They've been awesome press conferences to have that availability at this time of year. But those guys, how much can Phil Simpson say about Dasan McCullough? For one, he's just getting to know him, and maybe he does have more thoughts than he unveiled, and he probably does.
But he left himself open to a follow-up because he mentioned some older guys when he talked about Mav and some guys in the room.
Yeah, that's usually the clue, I guess, or it's a coach maybe putting on a tee. Maybe some won't do that in the future. If you mention like unsolicited, like 2 or 3 guys' names, then sometimes it does feel like it becomes a little bit open season. Like, okay, we're going to go through the roster now.
Because that's what we want to know about, right? Like we want
Yeah.
to know about some guys.
And so that was the jam of the last 2 weeks. It was an awesome thing, but also you have a bunch of people in the room who are like just dying for like kind of to get going into the roster talk in the spring. Like, let's have these competitions out and stuff like that. And you have coaches who, why would you go on record saying a lot about any individuals right now without having your hand forced there? So there was like a give and take probably going on. But I didn't think for the most part, guys got a lot of questions about individuals. I do think when they come up starting in a couple weeks and then you get like 2 to 3 weeks in, it can be more interesting from the personnel standpoint. I mean, there's so many guys like in the secondary. And I'm not saying this to butter you up. Like, I'd love Caleb Benning is like one of the most interesting guys to me.
Yeah.
Going into the spring. That's true. That's not because you're on the other end of this. I mean, so there's like, but there's like 10 to 12 in that room that just fascinate me. Heck, I wrote about it last week.
You want a chicken nugget, BC?
Yeah, give it to me.
I'll give you one because I love you. So he ran 21.92 a couple of times in winter conditioning because they've been going over the catapult scores. So the top, I think I can say this, the top handful of times this winter have been had by defensive backs. Take that one and run with it this offseason story.
I pay attention to what you say. I actually heard you last week on that, and I think Donovan Jones was up there, and so I was proud of the Omaha boys representing like that.
And they're roommates too. So
wow.
the thing that I love, and I hate to again, we're in the tree of trust because it's you. So I'm talking about all these things in these dynamics without picking brains about what's actually going on inside the program, because that's not what I really want to know. I'm more of the real magic happens when you can cheer for your teammates, even though it may be at your own expense. Like that's kind of how I am, because ultimately I think that's how Nebraska's got to win. It's not going to be high end talent. It's not going to be anything other than you got to work. You got to have competitive stamina, and you have to hang in there with good decisions in crunch time. That is how this team is going to win. It's not going to be elite level quarterback play. It's not going to be elite level wide receiver. They're going to be a sum of the parts team, in my opinion. You don't have. So when I look for things that lend itself to that, and I think the way that certain guys get along, right? The clusters, or if it's a Van Poppel, a Donovan Jones, a Caleb Benning, a Sierra Wright, and I'll give an offensive guy that they like, Danny King, right, at tight end. Like those are things that I look for when I want to try to project, can they hang in there in crunch time? Because I think for me, it's based on how well you get along internally that gets you over the hump and those kinds of things. So I think for this team, for all the new faces and new places, I actually think chemistry and camaraderie will be huge for this football team this year with so many competitive spots.
Yeah, no question. And I heard you last week on the times that Caleb and Donovan had, and I think it felt like, as you were explaining it, that it was like, yeah, that's what happened. And he would kind of moved on to the next thing. Like, it's like, what's next up that day? And I think
it was mat drills, and I needed to shut my mouth. So I was like, okay.
But I love that mindset too. Like you do something that is a feat that a lot of people would beat their chest about a little bit. And it's sort of like, yeah, that's what happened. And now let's try to get it better. And so I think if you can, and then if you get a room full of guys like that where it's like, do you see what so-and-so did? And each trying to better that. But there's this friendship that goes with it, this fraternity of you're in it together, like you're saying. And I do think that's what is really successful about their mat drills is the accountability. I mean, I don't know all the ins and outs of everything that goes on there. It's sort of spoken about generally.
I would lose my mind. I'm immature now. I was immature even more between 18 and 22. But when I need you, BC, think of it like this. And you were probably the one that everybody wanted in their group, right? So think of a group project, and you got to get it done. And everybody has to carry their weight. But you need different skill sets within the group, right? So if you need a grunt, if you need a creative guy, if you need a protocol girl, if you like, everybody kind of has to do their thing for the team to work. Like that's mat drills.
You know what they truly have over there, I believe fully, and people get so sick of this word in the off season, but they do have a culture that is real. And the reason I believe fully that is not just blah 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 is because, like, even when when we have recruits, like one of our national guys will get like a quote from a player about like his top 6 schools, and sometimes it's just a line, and a lot of them, I'll be honest, can be like throwaway lines. But with the Nebraska, when it's a line from a recruit about Nebraska and why he likes it, he's always talking about the culture and the family, and it's a little different than some of the answers. And I've really taken note of that. And so I think, obviously, the players feel it every day that are over there, but I think people even pop their head in for a visit, sense that, and that can be really effective for this program. We'll see if it can translate to a few more wins, but I do believe fully that is on point, probably more so than a lot of places.
We're talking with Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. BC, I'm kind of thinking through this in real time as you and DB are kind of going back and forth about, being able to root for one another, but also being highly competitive with one another. And I'm trying to think to myself, what does that culture have to look like to enable both of those things that seem to be contrary to one another, right? And so I'm like, well, they must have to get along pretty well. I go, well, not necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
I do think there has to be a culture of a certain level of respect for one another.
Yeah.
And the reason I landed there is, we've all been like in competitive situations professionally, I think. And there's been times where you kind of, or at least me personally, I've been passed over for jobs that I wanted. And there's sometimes, if I respect the other person that gets the job, I don't have a problem with it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
If I don't, then I'm going to feel some type of way. So I think I landed on respect. And there's not a question in there, just curious.
No.
Have any thoughts?
No, I agree with you. And I think if you, when Rule was on the podcast with Urban Meyer, he was talking about Dylan Ryla and about like, he's going to be like on a magazine cover and he's going to have that stuff. That's what goes with being the quarterback. But if the guys see him doing the tough stuff, not the fun, like maybe 7-on-7 or whatever, throwing on air is fun to him, but like the stuff that is the grunt work, and he is putting it in just like everybody else. I thought Rule made a good point. It's like those other guys aren't going to care about the magazine cover and all that stuff. They're going to be like, this guy wants to win. That's what comes with his title, being QB1, all the other stuff. I get that, but he's going to sweat just as much as me. He's going to be there earlier than me. And yeah, I think that respect, that goes to that respect factor. It's that guy's putting in the work to win at a high level. And in fact, maybe in some cases he's doing it better than me. So I gotta take his lead, or and then it goes back and forth, and one guy puts his nose in front of the other guy, and so on. So if you can really get that going now, I do think these are pivotal weeks. They're hard to get your hands around as like a writer because you're not doing as many interviews, and they're not going to tell you everything that's going on over there. But I do think it's huge establishing what certain guys are about and how far they'll go right now, that the players are taking note of. They're taking note of each other and who does what and how they handle their business.
Yeah. So, by the way, hey, what's your name again?
My name?
Yeah.
My name's Brian.
Brian. Hey, nice to meet you, Brian. Nice to meet you, Brian. That was interesting yesterday with Coach Brad.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I was like, what's? I was very.
How you doing, Brian?
I was very confused what you were
doing, Brian.
Yeah, I was too. You were throwing me for a loop there. Yeah,
he's sipping his.
He's like, can I just drink my coffee?
He's sipping
what's
his
happening?
Folgers. He's like, this dude is a wackadoodle. So if you're looking at, and I said this last week, and I'm curious to kind of get your thoughts about Coach Simpson. and as it relates to yesterday. So Coach Simpson gave this answer yesterday or last week about this blend of young players, old players, development, and coaches that were hungry and developing, right? And he threw in the coaches, and I said to Ravi, I said, it felt unsolicited, right? But what I didn't know is they're on the heels of that 6-hour meeting or whatever that Coach Rule had with the staff. So it kind of makes sense now. Then I listened yesterday. I listened to Coach Eckler talk about the reverence for Coach Rule's leadership style. I listened to Terry talk about, how Reed loves Coach Rule. There's the backstory, which I think would be good for you to get into of Coach Reed, sons, and Coach Rule, which will explain that dynamic. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, BC.
Okay.
And how they have hungry coaches and teachers in that room. It's got to be intentional, right? Where I get the fact you look at the coaching staff and you think, it looks like it's better on paper. But then you get inside of the message of what each of these guys is saying. When you hear them, does it come across as natural to you or something that has definitely been ingrained in the short time that they're here, or both on how they're not finished products yet?
Both. I think if you look at the guys who are quote unquote younger coaches, they've cut their teeth, all of them, with some pretty good names that they've learned from already. And I think it's already like established with all of those coaches. I mean, Terry Braden's been around freaking Andy Reid, and like seeing how that mastermind works. And I think you sort of just you catch your stride at a young age in coaching. Like, this is what look at what this guy's doing over here. And then you're like, oh, but this guy does this thing pretty well. And like, if you listen to Addison Williams, he talked about like his mentors, and he named off like 3 guys. And like one of them was Steve Wilkes, and just like how nobody commands a room like Coach Wilkes. And like, he takes sort of like, I think how that, like, probably the messaging that he had in certain moments to a team. And that's one thing. And so I think he does have a staff of guys who are, as you heard Eckler say, like, I'm scribbling notes left and right. Guys who know they're never the finished product. There's an understanding that guy over there, Phil Snow, is 69 years old. He's been doing this for longer than some of them are alive. I would be wise, as Phil Simpson said, to be like a parrot, and be like on that guy's shoulder, because I mean, it's just
what he could explain in 10 minutes, Snow could do in 30 seconds.
Yeah. I think it's that's a sign of wisdom, to understand there's somebody over there that knows more than you, like, and you're always searching for it. So I have to think that's a trait like that Matt Rule and Phil Snow, when they're looking at these guys that, they're after, obviously. And then there's connections that are obvious. Like Terry Braden is like in the same tree, like D-line, like technique wise, like T. Knighton was. And so I think they can kind of pick up where they left off. He's going to have a different personality, but I think some of the base stuff is going to be the same to guys. Addison Williams, even though he was a young coach, was at South Carolina in 2011 when John Butler was there. And so there's a relationship already built in. So all that stuff I think is useful. And this staff wasn't obviously Captain Obvious. It wasn't put together willy-nilly, but I think as you look closer at it, there is an intention to it that is can be impressive. And you would think this could really work if this meshes like your mind kind of thinks it will at kind of going through the parts of it.
BC, I'm curious. DB kind of said something in passing where he goes, on paper, you can make the argument that this coaching staff is possibly better than last year's. But when you look at it, I think we've had a chance to talk to all of the new coaches now, not including Holgerson, who we got a little bit last year, right? Is that your perception of this coaching staff, or are you just in pure wait and see mode? I guess just on paper, what's your thoughts on how this came together?
I better say wait and see right now, because this is that time of year where
the off season. I get it, BC.
Yeah. No, but I'm encouraged. I like how it looks. I mean, no doubt about it. It was like a shot to my veins, like to hear Mike Eckler yesterday. Like, and just like when he's up front, you can say, "Oh, does that translate?" To getting guys fired up to play special teams and all that, and taking it one notch higher. Yeah, I think it can. I think he's just got a way about him, and I I think his track record. I'm going off base just on Eckler here now, but the last 4 years at Tennessee, that's as good of a recent resume as I remember anybody coming to Nebraska with, like for what they're being asked to do. Like when he first, go ahead.
I'm sorry. And it's not like I love the guys that get a job when they're not looking for a job. Like his affinity for Heupel is real.
Yeah, it is.
So to come here based on that success, BC, you're on to something. Don't undersell that.
Well, what did he say? He goes, yeah, one of the most famous coaches in the sport called me, and he just wasn't having it.
I don't undersell that.
Honestly, I'm tired. have got tired like 5 years ago or so of like, oh, this guy has this Nebraska connection and he has to do that. And so at first glance, you could be like, okay, of course they're going to hire the guy who's been here before, David City native, Blair High grad. And then you look at the numbers and it's just like, oh, they're good in this category, top 10 over here, top 10. It's impressive. And, I mean, I like the fact that he knew how many return yards they had in the punt game, like off the cuff, and how many kicks they blocked.
Corrected somebody.
1,325 and 8 blocks. And I mean, that I like a little bit of that swagger with also a knowledge like you got to do it in a new place. You got to get these guys to go the same way you had the last guys going. And I also like that he was talking about, at Tennessee, they didn't play just starters and guys like that on special teams. It was a good chance for guys to build up roles that weren't necessarily on the front of the two deep. And so there's got to be some players over there who are chomping at the bit here and that. Like I can carve a role with this guy, and I'm going to be excited to do it and play under him.
So BC, before we let you go here, just stay on.
We're keeping him.
Okay. Can I stay on?
Hopefully you don't have some sort of, coffee shop super cool interview, because I got to get you for about 5-6 more minutes.
Let's go.
So when we're talking about Eckler, and I'm gonna end with a goofy question about him, but I'll stay serious here for a second. Were you at all taken in by the fact that he seemed? You mentioned the freshman and walk-on thing, because that's what he said about who played at Tennessee, right? He's like, it wasn't the starters,
yeah,
the freshmen and walk-ons. Were you taken? Like, did you read anything into that to say, like, hey, this isn't necessarily a talent issue that Nebraska's had on special teams. This isn't necessarily hey, they're just not putting good enough players on the field to make these plays. I took that as, hey, I can take the guys we've got. We don't have to put our starters in these positions, and we'll be able to be good at special teams. Like, am I reading too much into that?
No, not at all. And the clip you played just before I came on hit on that. Just like, there's fast guys here. They can put it down in testing, just like other places that he's been. And so, I think that the door's open for young guys, and I think he thinks there's talent here. He's just figuring out who's who and all that. I think there's going to be an eagerness to. I thought this was interesting to be the return guy here. Like he was asked about Andrew Marshall specifically.
Yeah. But they tried to pigeonhole him. He's like,
he got out of that corner.
He's like, nah, we got some dudes.
Yeah, and dudes who saw that they put a couple guys in the league at that position, and so there's going to be a hunger. Not that there wasn't before, but I have to think, there's 7-8 guys who are probably knocking on that door saying, "I'm your man," and so that's a good thing if you can get that sort of that culture build. I do think you heard, though, there's a willingness if guys are up for it. It's a great way for a younger player to build a role and to give trust to him and say, this is your assignment. You're going to do it well. And I believe you will do it well. We're not going to take a back seat just because you're in your first or second year. So I have to think that puts a pep in the step of guys just to hear that. And maybe they already knew it, but I think it's interesting.
So BC, I'm gonna get you out of here in this. Because I think Terry is in the same vein. I was telling Ravi off air, and I believe this to be very, 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 very true. Just because there's two guys that I have really good relationships with, randomly in the NFL, and both guys said, "I can't wait to see." Basically, I'm paraphrasing. I can't wait to see what this coach rule is about, because guys like Terry had D-line jobs that they were offered in the NFL this year. Like real. And my response is, offered, yes, could have taken the job if he wanted it. It was his. I don't even think BC, and who knows if they'll roll tape and this will get back to Nebraska and all of a sudden Coach Rule will be like, oh, that's news to me. But I believe it to be true. So, I mean, whatever. I'm saying it out loud. And you talk about guys like Eckler, who had the relationship with Heupel, was highly successful in Tennessee. You have a guy like Addison Williams, who was highly sought after and explained the connection and then said, you know what? This is something I got to look into. Let me see what this Coach Rule is about. Do you think we undersell Coach Rule's leadership ability or leadership qualities to peers? Holgerson's here on the second callback. Snow wasn't enamored the first time around. And Rule's this guy. He's back. Sad is loyal to the soil. We may be missing something about the belief factor.
No, you might be right. I just think about it.
I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, even from the seat I'm in, you go over there and, there's been times where we've gone over there on a Monday and they had a bad weekend. It was a bad Saturday. And he does have a gift for communicating in a way that I think makes you believe they can turn the corner. They're going to get past this. And I think there's a confidence that's instilled in you when you listen to him. So I can only imagine behind the scenes when he's talking to guys about a job and what his vision is, that he communicates it at a higher level than a lot of people do. And what they're planning to do, and how you would fit here. And he is a really, really gifted communicator. There's no doubt about it. I mean, we're spoiled in that respect. Just to next week, he's going to do a press conference, and I've done this long enough, and this is not a knock on other coaches, but there've been head coaches who have walked in and done 20-25 minute press conferences, and there's two things in there that are kind of interesting at most. And when Rule, gets up and talks each time, every answer usually turns to something that is sort of oh, that's a story. And the way he explained it is really interesting. That's why everybody wants him on their podcast. All these national guys want him on there because he's such a good communicator. All that to say, I do think when he's talking to coaches about their possibilities within the program, he probably does it in such a way that it's man, I got to think about this. And when Eckler said, he's one of the best leaders in the way he communicates, I'm taking all these notes. I took him at his word, and I think that's true. I think he's probably really impressive and just kind of interesting for a coach to listen to and say, I'm going to grow from this guy, however long I'm here.
BC, real quick, favorite saying from Eckler yesterday: "My ass, my hands," or "Donkeys don't win the Kentucky Derby"?
No, you got to put in RLS.
Oh yeah, real life Shazay.
Yeah, that was probably my favorite. The last one.
I still don't know what "my ass, my hands" means.
I don't either. He said it was an old saying, and so I Googled that in the press room, which was probably dangerous. Nothing too bad came up, but
whose Wi-Fi were you on?
Yeah, they could be checking me out right now, but it did not seem like that is a saying that's used as much as Eckler suggested on that one. But I don't know. Maybe.
BC, I got a little tip for you.
Look, everybody loves BC. BC, we're just going to keep you all morning, man. I'm glad you signed up for it.
DB gave you a real tip on a story. I'm going to give you a silly tip on a story. Have you heard of Mike Eckler and his piranha?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I think we need some follow-up. I need some follow-up questions.
No, I've already even used that example in a story like a few months ago, and I felt bad about it because that's like a 30-year-old story, and I was like, oh, I'm that guy who's doing that again. But
I'm still fascinated by it. I want to know if he still has it. I want to know if he still has.
Yeah, we could probably get to the bottom of that. I learned stuff when I come on here. Like, you want to know a little chicken nugget that was thrown in there by Damon? He said Danny King. Like, he brought up Danny King as someone. Like, and that's the kind of nerd I am about the roster, Damon. And I was like, oh, Danny King. Like, now you're gonna see that as like a bullet point in a story sometime soon.
Well, I'm glad you caught that, because sometimes he just announces people have committed to the school that haven't actually done that yet. And it just slides right through. So I'm glad you picked up on that one, BC.
Damn you, BC.
We appreciate it as always.
See, you're so disarming. And if you just like let me go, just give me 3 minutes. Like, I'll spill the tea.
Well, people rather hear you talk than me babble, so that's fine.
It's like yin and yang. I'm not good without your ability to be who you are. So you like free me up to ask the questions, right? It's mutual.
I'm just like a wall, but I have I can drink coffee. Like,
wait, did you change mugs?
I have two. I gave myself away. I have 2 mugs. Yeah.
Jeez.
I get after it. It's no joke.
Drink up.
That's how you get 5 cups in.
Holy smokes.
BC, we appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you again soon.
Yep. Thanks, guys.